Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special battlefield report. In 2024, China's posture has grown increasingly aggressive. General Flynn, the commander of the U.S. Army Pacific, recently revealed key insights into the U.S. military's strategic positioning in the Indo-Pacific region. But notably, his brother, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, was the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency and is closely linked to Trump. General Flynn's remarks drew significant attention. On October 15th, in a panel hosted by the new National Security Center, General Flynn bluntly stated, "China is on a dangerous path." He emphasized that this isn't a recent development, but something that has been unfolding over the past 2 to 3 decades. China's actions, marked by deception, legal warfare, corruption, and frequent infringements on neighboring countries' sovereignty, are deeply irresponsible. When a reporter asked, "Can the U.S. military slow down China's actions?" the underlying meaning was clear. Everyone knows that economic and diplomatic means haven't been effective. The question essentially referred to military measures, and using the term slow down seems outdated 20 years ago, perhaps now with the PLA acting so aggressively, slowing it down is akin to wanting to cripple it. While General Flynn's response was cautious, he hinted at a critical point: time is running out. The reporter astutely followed up with another question: is this solely a military matter, or has Washington already authorized action? This question was significant, because once government authorization is given, action could commence at any moment. Flynn didn't provide a direct answer, but disclosed something even more explosive. He revealed that the U.S. Army Marine Corps and the Special Forces have long been fully prepared for operations in the Indo-Pacific, with multiple strategic corridors already in place. Flynn mentioned corridors extending east, west, north, south, and central. While the general didn't name specific countries involved, astute netizens speculated that the central corridor might refer to airborne operations targeting Hunan, Hubei provinces, with the southern corridor Myanmar and Vietnam. The western corridor could include Central Asia, while the northern corridor extend to Mongolia and North Korea. Flynn further added, maintaining this deployment requires relentless effort every day. The implication was clear: the U.S. military strategic positioning has been years in the making, constantly being reinforced to maintain absolute superiority in the Indo-Pacific. From a strategic perspective, the U.S. military's deployment may serve several purposes. Rapidly controlling key facilities, particularly nuclear sites, the multiple corridors are reminiscent of the operation to eliminate Osama bin Laden launching simultaneous attacks from various directions to ensure swift errors. 2 targets. 2. Protecting critical infrastructure and industrial bases, especially those involving U.S. investments. This also explains the need for such extensive deployment. 3. With these corridors in place, the U.S. can rapidly deploy forces to control multiple strategic objectives, maximizing suppression of the enemy's response capabilities. Flynn's remarks also hinted that the U.S. has already secured positional advantages in some regions. While he didn't specify which areas, it's widely believed that the Western Pacific is firmly under U.S. control. On this topic, it's worth mentioning the Gobi Warrior joint exercise held in Mongolia in June of last year between the U.S. military and Japan's JEF defense forces, demonstrating the U.S. military's ability to project power across vast distances. Though the transportation methods weren't detailed, there are reports that the U.S. is developing cutting-edge technologies like space planes and hypersonic transport systems. The X-37 Billion is a prime example of this, a craft that briefly enters low Earth orbit before re-entering the atmosphere and landing directly in target areas, avoiding detection by traditional air defense systems. On the Chinese side, the problems are becoming more evident. Immediately after the joint Sword 2024 billion military exercise, Xi Jinping rushed to the Fujian military district to visit the troops. This sent a clear signal: morale within the ranks is low, and soldiers are reluctant to engage in combat. Xi's personal appearance was clearly an attempt to boost morale by force. At the same time, the recent formation of a Taiwan Strait operational group, ostensibly to strengthen command, in reality adds another layer of authority over the existing military command structure. This strongly suggests that the military is no longer fully obeying orders, necessitating an extra institution exerting control. All these signs indicate that, while China outwardly projects strength, internal cracks are already starting to show. Meanwhile, the U.S. military has long been fully prepared in the Indo-Pacific. And if China continues to push its expansionist agenda in such an unstable state, it may well end up reaping the bitter fruits of its action, descending into an irreversible catastrophe. On October 17, 2024, Zelensky's performance at the EU headquarters in Brussels evoked memories of Czechoslovakia's fate in 1938. At that time, Czechoslovakia was pressured at the Munich conference with European powers handing over the Sudetenland to Hitler to avoid war with Nazi Germany, ultimately leading to Czechoslovakia's loss of independence. Today's Ukraine, despite facing similar international pressure and internal conflicts, displays a stance in Brussels far from the helplessness of Czechoslovakia back then. German Chancellor Scholz, addressing 17 European partners of Ukraine, bluntly stated Germany has made its decisions, and these decisions will not change. Although Germany didn't explicitly say so, everyone knew he was referring to his unwillingness to invite Ukraine to join NATO or provide weapons for long-range strikes on Russian territory. However, Zelensky demonstrated his usual diplomatic wisdom and resilience. We've had multiple conversations with Scholz and other countries with long-range capabilities. Thanks to Ukraine's domestically produced long-range weapons and the Storm Shadow missiles provided by the UK and France, we've been able to sink 23 Russian warships in Crimea. We've never used German long-range weapons because they haven't provided any. Zelensky used facts to show European partners that Ukraine not only has sufficient strength in combat, but also isn't solely reliant on Western weapon support. But regarding Ukraine joining NATO, Zelensky stated Scholz has never said no, nor has he said yes. We're working to convince him. Although Ukraine has achieved some victories on the battlefield, discussions within Europe about supporting Ukraine remain full of contradictions and disagreements. There are rumors that if Ukraine continues to refuse a ceasefire, some countries might suspend military aid. NATO's Secretary General Stoltenberg clearly stated Ukraine will eventually join NATO, it's just a matter of time. While his words offered some comfort to Ukraine, the specific timeline for joining NATO remains unclear. This ambiguous stance undoubtedly puts Ukraine in a dilemma, continuing to fight without sufficient support, while a ceasefire would mean making major concessions on territorial issues. Zelensky again warned in Brussels about 10,000 North Korean soldiers participating in the war, but this claim was questioned by some Western diplomats. Under these circumstances, Zelensky made a shocking statement: either we join NATO or we'll develop nuclear weapons. This comment shocked the reporters present, but also reflected Ukraine's desperation and helplessness after international agreements were violated. On December 5th, 1994, at the OSCE meeting in Budapest, 3 agreements were signed to provide security guarantees for Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan to join the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Russia, the US, and the UK initially signed the guarantees, with France later signing a similar treaty with Ukraine. According to the agreements, Ukraine transferred its nuclear arsenal to Russia, and the countries pledged to respect Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and 91 borders. However, in 2014 and 2022, Russia, one of the signatories, blatantly violated its promise not to use force against Ukraine by directly invading Ukrainian territory. Clearly, international agreements are merely political commitments rather than legally binding treaties. Faced with such a flagrant violation of the agreement, one has to ask, does Ukraine have reason to reconsider policy? However, for some reason, Ukraine didn't immediately restart its nuclear weapons program. Now, this might involve international pressure, economic constraints, technical obstacles, or hopes for a diplomatic solution. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Ukrainian forces showed extraordinary courage, resisting fiercely and seeking international support. However, international support has been weakened due to the Chinese factor. China's diplomatic and economic support for Russia has diminished to the international sanctions and pressure on Russia, directly leading to Ukraine's difficult situation on the battlefield. Ukraine, unable to tolerate this any longer, has put the issue of resuming nuclear weapons back on the agenda. Several months ago, senior Ukrainian officials stated Ukraine will not tolerate a second Russian attack on Kyiv. We have the technology and management to build our first nuclear bomb in just a few weeks. The West should think less about Russia's red lines and more about ours. Faced with this situation, Zelensky expressed Ukraine's predicament to former US President Trump. We're in a difficult situation, so where's the way out? Either we have nuclear weapons for self-defense, defending ourselves, or we need to establish some kind of alliance. And besides NATO, we don't know of any effective alliance today. Surprisingly, Trump responded, "Your reasoning is fair. This answer is intriguing and may reflect some understanding of Ukraine's situation." The latest developments suggest that the situation may not be as gloomy as it initially appeared. Because despite Germany's hard to amaze, other countries within NATO and the EU are not united. Zelensky presented this plan to the leaders of 27 EU countries at the EU summit in Brussels, frankly pointing out the reaction to the victory plan is similar to the delivery of Patriot missile systems and F-16 fighters, initially rejected by the West, but eventually agreed upon. Notably, capital is flowing. Recently, international financial giants like Blackstone Group and JP Morgan Chase visited Kyiv, planning to invest over $500 billion in Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. This massive investment plan is a clear signal. Not only will Ukraine not fall, but the international financial world is optimistic about Ukraine's long-term prospects. In his speech in Brussels, Zelensky also specifically pointed out that the end of the war doesn't depend on Russia's will, but on the determination of Ukraine's partners. He emphasized, Unless Putin feels he must end the war, it won't end, and he only understands power. In Ukraine's victory plan, Putin's role has been margined. Ukraine no longer hopes to reach a compromise through negotiations with him, but relies on its own strength and that of the international community to force Russia through battlefield victories. It's reported that the Biden administration will also send U.S. political and military representatives to discuss the victory plan with Ukraine. These developments indicate that although Ukraine faces challenges, international support has not completely disappeared. The end of this war is not as distant as the outside world imagines. The involvement of international financial capital, the gradual support of Western allies, and Ukraine's own firm determination are pulling Ukraine out of the quagmire of war. As Zelensky said, war reports may lie, but capital doesn't. Ukraine has not only made important progress in the battlefield, but has also paved the way for victory on diplomatic and economic fronts. In this war, Ukraine will not fight alone, and the dawn of victory is gradually emerging. That's all for today's special report. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay tuned for more of Russia's finest military comedy. Don't forget to like and subscribe for your daily dose of chaos.